I had no interest in another Bob Dylan biopic, especially one starring Timothy Shamalama Ding Dong.
Who put the rhyme in the rhyme-a-lama ding-dong?
It sounds like a joke to a Bob Dylan fan. The young new pretty boy actor Timothy Chalamet is gonna play Bob Dylan. I guess Johnny Depp played Hunter S. Thompson and that worked, so anything's possible, but this movie just was something I had absolutely no interest in. But then I saw Timothy Chalamet on Nardwuar, the Shamalama Ding Dong and the Nardwuar teaming up. And Timothy Chalamet came off pretty likable there. He seemed really passionate about Bob Dylan. In the comment section, people were joking that he knew more about Bob Dylan's life than his own because that is the way he came across. He seemed uninterested in his own life. Anything brought up about Bob Dylan, he would be so passionate about. He was able to rattle off all these specific details about Bob Dylan's life. It was definitely impressive, and he seemed to have learned instruments. Wow, this kid that's an encyclopedia Bob Dylan is going to play Bob Dylan in a movie? That's great. It's not just some pretty boy actor that got to be him. But like the Hunter S. Thompson thing, it's yeah, Johnny Depp was a fan of Hunter S. Thompson. He stayed with him. He got to know him. He portrayed him very well in that movie. So I was hoping that maybe we'll see that with Timothy Chalamet. But this is Bob Dylan here, so I'm sure he didn't meet him, let alone stay in his basement sleeping next to kegs of gunpowder.
But the bastard moved in. We had him in kind of a cell in the basement.
Johnny Depp slept in your basement?
Yeah. He discovered a keg of dynamite. Or, flash powder, actually gunpowder, right next to his bed.
I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan. My dad was a huge Bob Dylan fan. The first concert I ever went to as a little kid was Paul Simon and Bob Dylan together. I'm one of those people that Dylan is the ultimate for me. But I don't like biopics, so I wasn't excited about this movie. There was already a Bob Dylan biopic that I was once very excited about seeing and ended up being more than lackluster. And now I'm old and jaded, and I definitely am not excited to see a Bob Dylan biopic. But that Nardwuar interview really got me thinking maybe it will be something that will be worth watching. I don't know. I don't like biopics in general, though. I don't see biopics of people. I mean, I've seen a bunch. It's a pretty prevalent genre of movie, but it's not something I get excited about going to see. If there's a biopic coming out about someone I like, I most likely will not see it. I would rather see a good documentary about that person's life, not a dramatized version of their life. I always think it's so depressing to see something like that. The Ray Charles movie to me was just so depressing to see his whole life concentrated down to a few horrible moments of him cheating or abusing his wife and doing drugs. It was just oh man, I thought this guy was some great dude we were supposed to love, and they took his whole life and they just showed you all of the worst things they could show you. By the end of the movie, you're like, why is this guy great? Why did we make a movie about this guy? You don't want to see a whole lifetime of somebody shortened down to an hour and a half. And that's what Tarantino says. He says you shouldn't do a biopic about someone's entire life. You should do a biopic where you do a day in their life. He has said that if you would do a movie about Elvis, you don't want to do birth to death from Elvis. You should talk about the day in Elvis's life where he went to Sun Records and he recorded his first song, or the day before that, and you see what leads up to the day that made Elvis Elvis. And the last scene would be Elvis walking into Sun Records. And I don't know if it quite has to be a day in their life like Tarantino is saying. It could be a week or an event or a period of time in their life. That idea is something that appeals to me much more. I think you can get a much better story across by actually trying to tell a specific story. A great example of a biopic done right is Steve Jobs. It's written by Aaron Sorkin, and he has a great focus for the script. He focuses on 3 product launches, and the movie is basically 3 separate vignettes seeing Steve Jobs deal with the different launches of these 3 products. Almost none of the specifics and the things people said to each other happened the way they happened in real life as they are depicted in the movie Steve Jobs, but it doesn't matter. It's all a representation of the whole. It's a movie. It's not trying to be a documentary. That's what some of these movies forget. It's also just depressing in general to see someone's entire life go by in the span of an hour and a half or a couple hours, because it makes you feel like life is so short. I can't stand watching a whole life go by so quickly, but other people seem to love it because they do it a whole bunch. It's like the movie Up. When people talk about the movie Up, they talk about the opening sequence of Up, and they talk about it as if it was not a couple minute sequence at the beginning of the movie. They talk about that being the movie. Ask someone about Up, they're not going to talk about, oh yeah, I love the mad scientist and the talking dog. That's what it really is. It's a movie about a dog that talks. It's just like, oh my God, the stupidest thing of all. Oh wow, there's a mad scientist who makes a device that makes a dog talk. And like, that's the whole movie. It's so annoying. It's terrible. Everyone talks about the opening of the movie. So I can see how the biopic genre would be appealing to people. The opening to Up has its own Wikipedia page. Just the opening sequence has its own Wikipedia page because people love it so much. But for me, I was excited when I heard this Bob Dylan movie wasn't going to be Bob Dylan's whole life in a movie. It was just going to show a few years of his life early on when he was just starting to record music. That's probably the most interesting period of time to show Dylan, is early young Dylan, him starting out and then him going electric. That's the exciting part of his career. He makes tons of great music afterwards, but in terms of what you could tell in a story, it's a perfect period to choose. So that made me, I wouldn't say excited to see it, but that made me interested in seeing the movie now. Now that I've seen this Timothée Chalamet interview, now that I know the movie is just about the early point in Bob Dylan's career, it's not a birth to death biopic. So I saw the movie and I think it was worth watching. As a big Dylan fan, there's tons of eye roll moments, but there was enough that I liked that I think I would even watch it again. There's lots of music in the movie. There's dozens of songs. I don't think they ever use a full song, but there's lots of pieces of songs throughout the movie, and it all feels incorporated organically into the movie. You'll just see Dylan, in a room strumming on the guitar singing, or working on a song, or in the studio recording. And then of course, lots of live performances that actually happened and showing those. As a fan of the music, that's probably what immediately drew me into the movie. Although all the songs are sung by actors doing impressions.
Flows out of their bodies and is buried in the mud.
And unfortunately, Timothy's acting never really goes beyond doing a basic impression. It's kind of your standard Bob Dylan voice everyone can do. Hey, Bob Dylan, that'll do.
People make up their past, Sylvie. They remember what they want. They forget the rest.
And it is Bob Dylan in general is very one note and one emotion. He's always mysterious. He's always trying to say something pithy.
I put myself in another place. But I'm a stranger there.
Bob Dylan wasn't always serious. If you watch the documentaries about young Bob Dylan, you often see him with a big goofy grin across his face and just being silly and having fun. He's a young kid. Yes, the old Bob Dylan and the jaded Bob Dylan. And they didn't need to make Bob Dylan this goofball the entire movie. I'm sure he wasn't like that.
My real message? Keep a good head and always carry a light bulb.
Time. It's all like a matter of time. They say. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you. I love you.
They needed to at least show a little bit of that in him, and maybe even more than a little bit, and they did really none of it. He was a one-note character. It didn't bother me too much, though. It's like, how do you play Bob Dylan in a movie? It just, being such a fan of a guy and knowing so much and seeing so many documentaries about him, it's like, how are you really going to watch another actor play this guy, no matter who it is and what they're doing? But then again, you do think about Johnny Depp as Hunter S. Thompson, and it's the same with him. I've seen tons of footage of Hunter S. Thompson, but still a Johnny Depp version holds up, so maybe someone could have done a better job than Timothy, but that really wasn't bothering me throughout the movie. I liked how Joan Baez was portrayed in the movie. She was always calling Bob Dylan an asshole and flicking him off.
Why did you come here?
What?
To make me watch you write? You're kind of an asshole, Bob.
Yeah, I guess.
They should have gone all in on this and just made the whole movie about this kind of thing. Call the movie, You're Kind of an Asshole, Bob. I don't know how accurate any of that was, but that's one of those things as a Dylan fan. It made me happy because I've always felt bad about the way Dylan seemingly used her and treated her. So it was nice to see her give Bob Dylan all this attitude.
It really displeases me that you went off and got married and
You went off and got married first and didn't tell me.
There's a particular moment I liked early on in the movie. Elle Fanning's character has recently started to date Bob Dylan, and they're having a party over at Elle Fanning's place. And one of her friends sees an old scrapbook of Bob Dylan's laying around, and she starts flipping through it, seeing that Bob Dylan just had a normal upbringing and he didn't have this mysterious, crazy past like he made it seem. So she goes to Elle Fanning and she starts mocking him. She's like, "Are these his friends from the circus?" And that was just cool to see because I've always wondered what that was like. What was it like to be around Bob Dylan when he was lying about about who he was. That must have been a weird guy to be around. So even though it's a brief moment, it was nice to show that. What's it like being around a guy who's making up these clearly ridiculous stories about his past?
Want a peanut? I used to live on these things when I worked at the carnival.
When he tries making up his stories to Joan Baez, she immediately shuts it down and doesn't buy it.
Picked up a few licks at the carnival.
At the carnival.
Yeah, these chords I learned from a cowboy named Wigglefoot.
You were in a carnival. You are so completely full of shit.
She didn't have a whole lot of character development or anything, but that was probably my favorite representation of someone in the movie. He does have some heartwarming moments. I did like seeing him first visit Woody Guthrie, but then he just kept on visiting Woody Guthrie over and over, and some of these moments were getting pretty cheesy, and I don't think Bob Dylan was that close to Woody Guthrie. In general, I just wish it was more historically accurate. There's too much made-up stuff, too many composite characters. For a movie covering such a short span of time, it would have been nice to see people represented as they really were. You know, they take every folk musician and they composite it into Pete Seeger, making it seem like Pete Seeger was a father figure to Bob Dylan. I don't know how much Bob Dylan even knew Pete Seeger, and that's what they do with Woody Guthrie as well. For the few characters they decide to put in this movie, they really exaggerate Bob Dylan's relationship to them. That goes to one of the main points of the movie, Bob Dylan's love interest in the movie. Bob Dylan really wasn't with this woman for as long as the movie is portraying, and there's just too much of a forced love story with Bob Dylan and Elle Fanning's character. By the end of the movie, he should almost be getting married to Sarah, but instead they have Elle Fanning's character at Newport 65 when Dylan went electric. Seems wildly unnecessary to recreate important historical moments like that. I don't want it to be a documentary. Get all artsy and symbolic, but if you choose to depict famous historical moments, do it accurately. And oh my god, the entire scene where Bob Dylan goes electric is so stupid and so overdramatic. It's really hard to watch. The movie in general was just too corny. Bob Dylan giving back his harmonica to Woody Guthrie, just like some moments like that are so heavy-handed. Bob Dylan seeing Elle Fanning leave as they talk through the fence. They try to make something out of this cigarette lighting thing and they bring it back like it's some sort of moment we're supposed to care about, some sort of important moment between these two characters. I would have liked to actually learn something new about Bob Dylan. I know so much about him from all these documentaries. It would be nice to watch a movie about this short period of time in his life and find out some things I didn't know. And I thought that's what was happening at first. You see him meet Pete Seeger, and then he stays over at Pete Seeger's house with his wife and kids, and it's just like, oh wow, I didn't know all this about Bob Dylan. I didn't know he had this relationship with Pete Seeger. But then by the end of it, it's also clearly blown out of proportion that it's just like, I don't know what to believe now. Now I don't believe anything about his relationship with Pete Seeger because I definitely don't believe all this stuff at the end. I feel like I was tricked then. I was like, oh, I was liking this movie at the beginning because I thought I was learning something new about Bob Dylan. But then by the end of it, I'm just like, I don't know if any of this is true. So what's the point of this movie? It's doing what movies do. It's trying to sell tickets. It's trying to appeal to a larger audience. It cares much more about that than it does about making a great Bob Dylan movie. The movie needed to be weirder. It needed to be something a little bit more artistic, but they tried that before and it was too artistic. It was terrible. Everyone was in it. I was looking forward to it so much. The movie was being talked about and hyped up so much. I remember saying to my dad at the time, what if this movie turns out to be bad? It will be so crazy and disappointing. But that didn't seem like the case. It seemed like it was going to be cool. All these different points in Bob Dylan's life shown artistically and metaphorically through different actors playing him. They have a little black boy playing him. They have a woman playing him. The best part was Cate Blanchett. She did a really good Bob Dylan impression, but that's all we see her do is an impression. They show her reenacting famous interviews of Bob Dylan that are readily available. If you're going to make a movie about somebody, why don't you show the moments that aren't available to watch? Don't show us the recorded moments in that person's life that we can actually watch the real person do. I don't want to see who's the best Bob Dylan impersonator. I want to see the behind the scenes moments. I want to see the other moments of the person's life that we haven't already seen on film. I remember my dad had that complaint with the Andy Kaufman movie, Man on the Moon. A lot of that movie shows Jim Carrey reenacting famous moments that Andy Kaufman did on SNL, Johnny Carson, and a bunch of other places. You can watch a lot of this footage. It's available. Although I was a kid when I saw that movie, so so I didn't have that complaint because I hadn't seen most of the Andy Kaufman stuff in real life. So I guess that's kind of what they're thinking when they make movies like this. They want to include these classic moments because the filmmakers figure most people probably don't know these moments, but to the actual fans, it's very hit or miss. I understand that in the life of a musician, it's important to show some famous concerts that have been recorded, and you can show the actors impersonating those famous performances. That's fine to do a few of those, but you don't need to show me interviews that Bob Dylan did. You don't need the actor beat by beat trying to recreate and impersonate Bob Dylan from an interview. Even though I didn't think Lil Timmy Shamalama Ding Dong was a very good Dylan, I did think that his enthusiasm and love for Dylan showed in the movie, and in that interview I watched, he was cast better in Dune. He plays a little Prince boy very well. So it's not that he's the greatest actor, but you can see his interest and passion for the roles that he chooses.